October is known for Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Yes.
And the goal for this month is to support victims as well as survivors, to educate and just raise a level of awareness about this common issue. And I was looking up some stats in regards to domestic violence, and I just want to kind of share them with you all briefly. Okay. So on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the US. And so let's just say about a year, we're talking about 10 million women and men. Okay. 1 out of every 3 women will be abused at some point in her life. Of the total domestic violence homicides, about 75% of the victims were killed as they attempted to leave the relationship or after the relationship had ended. 73% of male abusers were abused as children. On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide. 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year. And 90% of these children are eyewitnesses to this violence. About 4,000 women die each year due to domestic violence. And on average, a woman will leave an abusive relationship 7 times before she leaves for good. And there are different types of abuse. So in these stats, we're not just speaking from physical, right? These type of abuses include, but also not limited to, emotional, physical, financial, sexual, and even spiritual. And when an individual experiences abuse, it really does influence their thought processes and interactions with the world. And this ongoing and chronic exposure to these experiences can result in a range of detrimental effects, such as their mental stability, their levels of anxiety, triggering symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, feelings of depression, and also disassociation. And these profound and long-lasting impacts highlight the urgency of addressing domestic violence and supporting those who have been affected. And what I wanted to do today is that I wanted to bring someone that I met a few years ago who was working on her book at the time. And of course, it's published now, and we would definitely talk about that. And her book is on helping women overcome the after effects from domestic violence. And so my guest today is Miss Janelle Hunt. Janelle is a speaker. She's an author. She's a coach. She's also a survivor of domestic violence and an advocate for women's rights. She has dedicated her life to advocating for other survivors and equipping our daughters with the tools that they need to identify the early signs of domestic violence. Her mission is to create a world where every woman is free from the shackles of domestic violence. It's time to break the silence, raise awareness, and empower our daughters to recognize the signs so that they can walk a path filled with love, respect, and purpose. And so without further ado, Janelle, thank you so much for being here and being a guest with my last minute invitation. I appreciate it. I really do. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. I wanted to bring someone on to talk about this because, I'm gonna be honest, it needs to be more than a month, right? We don't want to make it seem like this is the only time we need to talk about it. I mean, this is just a month that's dedicated to it. And so many people, as you can see, as I was reading the stats, I'm just like, wow, because I was looking up the stats and just seeing the numbers of how many people are impacted by domestic violence can be very scary. And I wanted you to come on because I know you have been a survivor of domestic violence. And one of the things that I didn't read in your bio, because I wanted to bring it to a question, because I want to get a little backstory with you. You were in a domestic violent relationship for 7 years,
Yes.
right? 7 years. How long has been since you've transitioned out of that relationship?
It's been about 15 years that I transitioned out of that relationship. I was actually with him for 13 years, but it didn't start out abusive. It just ended up becoming abusive. He was abusive towards the last 7 years of our relationship because we met in high school. He was my high school sweetheart, and it didn't start out that way, but it ended that way. And a lot of the reasons is because I didn't know my worth and I didn't feel good about myself. I had self-esteem issues because I always felt overlooked even as a child because I was heavier than my sister. And I felt like a lot of people would overlook me and on the outside, not my family, but would tell her she was pretty, but wouldn't tell me I was pretty or wouldn't interact with me. A lot of the times they will overlook me. So that's where a lot of my issues came in because I didn't know my self-worth and I didn't have the signs to identify domestic violence in the beginning of a relationship. The aggressiveness, the signs of, not wearing what you want to wear, change your clothes because it's too revealing in his eyes. So it was different things that I wasn't equipped with during the relationship that I wasn't able to identify the signs because nobody ever told me.
So let me ask you this, because I know you said you all was together for 13 years, high school sweetheart. So we're talking about the 6 year, there a shift took place. What did that shift look like in terms of, being together? The relationship may have had its difficulties at times, but it wasn't to the degree of abuse. What what transpired that 6 year that started to indicate signs of abuse?
So the shifting was, I personally think, when I started losing weight in high school, I had lost a lot of weight, tremendous a lot of weight. It was probably like 60 pounds. And I started wearing things like cut up jeans, crop tops, skirts and things of that sort. And I felt like the jealousy of me not being the woman or the young woman that he thought I should be, as far as like isolated from my family and friends, not being revealing, making sure I'm not showing myself to the people on the outside. So it felt like I was stepping into my confidence and my beauty, and anything that I did to better myself, he talked down about. Even weight loss surgery. When I tried to go and get weight loss surgery, he didn't want me to get it because he knew that I was stepping into my confidence because I would be losing weight and I would be getting myself together as far as seeing myself as the woman God has created me to be, and not how society has showed me to be, as far as being overweight and not beautiful and people are not looking at you, they don't accept you. So I felt like that was the shift.
So what were some of the signs? What was some, I know earlier I mentioned the different types of abuse, right? Because we don't want to just limit this to physical. However, what was some of the abusive indicators? What were some of the things that, if you were to say, okay, this was a type of abuse that I had, what would that be?
So it was, I had a lot of mental abuse, like just telling me like nobody will ever love you like I love you. Just keeping me from wanting to go out or hang out with my friends or go away on trips with my friends, because he didn't want me to. So a lot of the things I held myself back from. It was things of just, even hanging out because he wanted to control me, because he wanted me to stay in the house and not be seen by other people. And also he cheated. He used to cheat a lot. And he didn't want me to run into the women or to see him out with somebody else. So I felt a lot of times I was isolated. So I wouldn't go to a lot of family events. I wouldn't go to a lot of my friends' birthday parties. Just to go and hang out. I would stay in the house because I thought He just wanted me to be in the house so he could know where I was. I thought it was love, but it was control. He was isolating me. And then, as I mentioned before, the changing of the clothes. Don't wear cut up jeans. Wear jeans that's not cut up. Don't wear a crop top because you're showing too much of yourself. Wear a full shirt, a full length shirt. So it was things of that sort that really kept me like, I felt like I was trapped. And now that I look back at it.
Okay. So was there any other signs of abuse, maybe in mental and emotional, kind of work hand in hand? Because of course, the words can impact how you feel and all those things. Was there any physical abuse?
Yes, it was. So
Mhm.
a lot of the times, if I confronted him on something that I did not like, or if he stayed out all night, if I confronted him or brought any of his wrongdoing to his face, he would get upset. He punched me in the eye one time. I had a black eye, because I was confronting him of the disrespect that he was doing towards me as far as staying out and cheating, and he didn't like that. So he punched me in my eye once. I would get punched in my legs a lot of times because he didn't want people to see that he was abusing me. So he only punched me in the eye once. And he got the back lack of, from his family, like, how could you do this? Why would you do this to her? So he didn't like that. So he switched the way that he would abuse me. So he would punch me in my thighs instead of in my face because he didn't want to be portrayed as this bad person in front of his family and friends.
Mm, wow. And basically I would say, so at this point, this was kind of 7 years of psychological and physical abuse.
Yes. Yes.
Uh, I'm gonna ask you a question. When I was looking at the stats, it said it took them 7 times before they said, you know what, I'm gonna leave and I'm not gonna go back. Did you ever leave? Did you find yourself in that cycle of leaving and coming back?
Oh, yes, several
You
times.
did.
I've left several times to move back to my mom's house because we used to live together. So I would move back to my mom's house, and I know I did it more than 7 times because of him being disrespectful, him being controlling, him being caught cheating. I would leave several times, but then two weeks or 3 weeks would go by, and then he would come back looking for me. He would want to talk to me. He would want to have conversation, and it always ended up with me like right back into his arms, no matter what the disrespect was. And I felt like it was more like a tug of war because sometimes in a relationship, it was like I would wait to see if he would call me, and he would do the same. So it was like we wouldn't call each other or anything, but as soon as he tried to contact me, as soon as he came to knock on my parents' door to talk to me, I would give in. And I thought, again, like it would get better, things would change, but it never changed. Every time I went back, it got worse.
Because that was kind of like my next question. Because I want to know, I want people to think about in the mind of someone who's being abused. Because I think the misunderstanding is that you just gonna leave and you would never go back. But there's reasons why people go back. Um, and because you had so much at this point, you had a lot of time invested too. So we have to take that into account, right?
Yes.
You've seen a side of him outside of being an abuser. So this was not normal behavior.
Yes.
And then when it started to become the behavior, and then he says, you know what, I'm gonna do better. What made you say, you know what, I'm gonna keep giving him another chance? Like what was it in your head that um caused you to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go back again? What were some of the different reasons? Because I'm sure there probably were different reasons.
Yeah. So a lot of the times it was because I didn't think I would get anybody else because of the things he would tell me. So the manipulation really stayed in my mind as, oh, I won't get nobody else. Nobody else would treat me the way that he treated me, which was not well. But I thought that's all I was acceptable of.
Mm-hmm.
So just thinking of not getting anyone else, but I truly did love him. I care for him. And I was hoping that every time he would change, like he would get better, because like he would always say like, we're going to get married, we're going to have children. And I held on to that dream for so long. So I felt like that was the reason also I went back. And also my heart was broken. And I know other people find things to cope with, drinking and things like that. But that was the only thing at the time that could fix my heart from being broken. So that was another reason why I would go back, because as soon as he would reach out to me, I would, my heart would feel better. I wouldn't feel upset. I wouldn't feel depressed. So that was also because I didn't think at the time it was another alternative. So that's another reason why I would always go back.
Wow. That's powerful to
Yes.
avoid feeling the pain
Mm-hmm.
of a heartbreak.
Yes.
Even though that was a pain, but it was a different kind of pain. Wow, that's I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
And so did your friends and family know? I mean, well, I know you mentioned that you end up going to your mom's house and stuff. How did that go? Because this is the hard part that I think family and friends struggle with. And that's seeing the person we love being hurt and they keep going back.
Mm-hmm.
And we know it's hurting them. But there's nothing we can do about it. And but allow them to decide when they're done. How did this impact your relationship with your family?
So I didn't tell my family all the details about how he would abuse me mentally or physically or emotionally or spiritually. I didn't tell them, like he didn't even want me going to church when I started surrendering my life to God. So I didn't tell them. I kept a lot of things from them because I know they would say that's not how you was raised. You didn't experience that. I don't know why you was involved. So a lot of things I kept to myself. So a lot of times I was masking how I felt and what I was going through. So a lot of times I would go around my family. I would just pretend like everything was normal. I never revealed anything to them until I walked away the last time. But my mom could tell some things was going on. The lifestyle he was living, he was in the streets and he sold drugs and he worked a professional job during the day. And she would just always tell me, I know something's going on. Just don't ever get in his car. Like stop riding in his car because I don't know what type of activities he's doing in the street and I don't want you harmed. But she would know something was going on. And she would always tell me, you're beautiful. You don't have to tolerate any disrespect. And I just want you to know that give it to God and he'll deliver you from it. And the turning point for me was my bonus father. He's passed on now, but he gave me a key to my mother's house. And he told me, I know something is going on. I can't put my finger on it. He said, but when you are ready to come home, the door is always open. And he said, I want you to use this key. So if you ever feel like you want to come home through the night, just know that the door is always open. We're here and we're ready. But the times that I would go back and forth, my mom would say, like, why are you bringing them clothes here? Why are you bringing things here when I know in 2 weeks you're going to be right back at his house? So I don't know why you keep going through this cycle. So a lot of things I didn't share with them. They knew something was going on, but a lot of things I kept silent.
Right. Because do you think that had something to do with protecting him?
Yes, protecting him, worrying about like how they would view him if I knew I was going back to him, just in how they would judge me, the shame, the guilt of me experiencing this and not revealing it to them. I just didn't want the judgment of
Yeah.
them saying, why are you doing this? Why are you going through this? You don't have to, but on the inside, my heart is aching. So it's hard to break away when you don't have, at the time, I didn't think it was no other alternative God to heal my heart, because I didn't even look at that route. I just looked at him, my abuser, like he'll heal my heart. He'll make me feel better. So like my happiness was through his eyes, because literally that's how I looked at him.
Wow. Wow. That's real. And I think a lot of people can relate to what you just said.
Yeah.
And I know for you, when you mentioned, okay, so let's kind of go back when you said your turning point, because I want to talk about this turning point now of you saying enough is enough. Like I'm done, you
Yes.
know, and it kind of reminds me, you know, of the Tina Turner movie. Like, let's just be real. What's love
Yeah.
got to do with it? When at that point she just had enough, right?
Yes.
And she got out the car, she ran, and she did not look back, right? And so you got to that point where I'm not going to look back. This is it for
Yeah.
me. What gave you that aha moment, that inner strength to say, I'm not going back? What gave you the strength this time? Because, and the courage, let me be clear, because it takes a lot of courage to leave these level of dynamics. And so what was that for you?
So the turning point for me is my abuser, he wouldn't come home at night because he was cheating with somebody else. And I used to cry and cry because I was like, why am I going through this? How am I going to get out of this? And one night I literally prayed, because I heard my grandmother, and she was basically, I remember when she used to allow me to lead prayer as a child, and she used to always say, I can pray for you, but you have to remember that you have to pray to God first so that he can help you. So I turned to God one night and I was crying and I was just praying to God, and I just asked him, if you take this pain away from my heart, I would never in all my life put anyone else in front of you. Because I was putting God second. I had my abuser as, I was looking at my abuser as God. He was my happiness. He was my everything. So when I prayed to God, I told God, I would never put anyone in front of you ever again. Just please heal my heart, because I couldn't go to nobody else because of the shame and the guilt I was carrying. So I didn't share it. So I just kept praying. And one day I remember I was standing in the kitchen cooking mashed potatoes for myself, and we lived together. And he was getting all his belongings together, and he was walking out the door, and he was like, I won't be home tonight. And any other time I would
Wow.
cry and get upset. Um, and I didn't that time. And that time when he shut the door, I didn't get upset. And I was like, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't affect me anymore. And that moment, I knew that God had heard my prayers and he had already started healing my heart. And also during the time that I was walking away, my abuser got addicted to PCP. And during that time, I was trying to help him be in rehabs. Like I used my health insurance that I had him on to get him in rehab facilities. In every facility he went in about 3, and nobody would keep him because of the way he was acting. With the nurses, he was very sexually active trying to be sexually active with the nurses, so they could no longer keep him. So he came back home, and I had just bought a 56-inch TV for our living room. And when he came back home, I had called his parents and I said, have you heard from him? And they said, no, we haven't heard from him. We picked him up and dropped him off, and we haven't heard from him since. And something in me gave me the strength to pick up that 56-inch TV off the wall. And I put all my stuff in the car and I never looked back. And that was my turning point.
Wow. Why did he try to get you back?
Yes, he tried to get me back. He tried to come back to the house, my mom's house, and tried to talk to me. But I remember the time when he came back to He wanted to speak to me, and I came out on the porch and I told my parents, I was like, he wants to speak to me. Don't worry, I'm not going back, but just keep an eye on me because I know he was addicted to PCP and I didn't trust him. So I went out and spoke to him, and we had a little chit chat like, hey, how you doing? I miss you. And I said, I'm doing good. I hope you're doing good. And at the end of the conversation, he asked me for a hug. And I didn't think of no harm of it. I was like, that's okay. I'll give you a hug. But when I tell you, when I hugged him, I got the most ilkiest feeling in my spirit that I ever had in my life. And I just knew that that was the transition of me never even having the desire to want to be with him. So I knew God was doing something internally in me, because just the touch of him, I could not stand. I couldn't take. So I knew at that point that I was done. I knew that God was doing a new thing in me. And after the years, as I was healing, I realized that I didn't think I was worthy because I got molested as a child. So my molester would, molest me, and would come back, back and forth and molest me during the times. And it was like, I was just like, I was
How
like,
old were you?
I was probably like 7 or 8. And I felt like,
Mm.
how the abuser, they be with you when they want to because they need you. And then afterwards, they just leave you alone and they don't need you. So I felt like that same behavior traveled into my abusive relationship, because me taking on the abuse. And I was just like, just sitting there waiting for him to come back and deal with me when he wanted to, and then just leave me. So I felt like that same behavior carried on in my adult relationship, in the abusive relationship, because I asked God, I said, why am I going through this? What is the connection? And he said the molestation. And that's where that behavior went on. And I had therapy, but forgiveness never came up. So I was still battling that as I got older.
Forgiving yourself?
Forgiving myself, forgiving the person who molested me, forgiving my abuser, forgiving the people who overlooked me,
Mm.
just all of that. I didn't realize that until I was going through my healing.
Mm. Let's talk about forgiveness for a second, because that can be a very um that's one of those words that gets a lot of resistance in
Mm-hmm.
terms of going through the process of forgiving and realizing that what you experienced in your relationship had a connection to your molestation as a 7-year-old, right? We're talking
Mm-hmm.
7 years old. And let me be very clear, this is not uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
That's the unfortunate part.
Yes.
And your forgiveness journey, well, first, let me ask you, do you feel like you're at a place where all is forgiven,
Yeah.
including yourself, right? Because let's not eliminate self-forgiveness out of the equation.
Yes. I do feel like that. Because God wanted me to write a chapter in my book on forgiveness, and he woke me up to talk about it, because I was bitter.
Yeah.
If you said anything to me, friends, family, strangers, if you said anything to me that I did not like, I would cuss you out. And it was a defense mechanism.
Right.
Because like, for a long time, I just wanted to be invisible. Like I didn't want to be
Yeah.
in front and center. And if anybody addressed me, or if you said anything that I did not like, I had a wall up. And like the song No New Friends, I had no new friends, and I didn't want anybody to come around me that was new, because I was dealing with trust issues, which I didn't know at the time. They labeled me as, that's the smart mouth one. Like, don't say nothing to her, she'll cuss you out. But in all actually, like I felt like I was like in a cage.
It
So
was
if
much deeper than that.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yes. So um that was, another thing. Like I had to go back and forgive. I didn't even know I was living in bondage for so many years. Like, how can you, like I would get smart on jobs. I would get smart to my bosses. I would get smart to people in school. Just I was always that woman and that girl, that little girl that was on go. And it was because I didn't trust anybody. I didn't know about forgiveness. My mom sent me to therapy, but no, the therapist never brought up forgiveness. I didn't know forgiveness until I was 7 or 8 years out of my abusive relationship. So forgiveness in my book was like a pivotal moment for me because it really allowed me to release the bondage that I was in from molestation, from my abuser, from the people who overlooked me, for the people who called me names when I was overweight, when I was a child. I felt like I was able to release that. And what I did was I wrote a letter to all my abusers, to the person who molested me. I forgave everything that hurt me to my core, even the people that overlooked me. And when I did that and was able to read it out, I released the biggest cry that I like wailed. And I felt like that was the turning point for me, for God to be able to allow me to start stepping into my purpose, because my heart was hardened.
Yeah.
I wasn't social with people because of the isolation from my abuse. I didn't interact with people because I didn't trust people. So the forgiveness really was a pivotal moment for me because it changed my life. It changed my relationships on how I judge people, how I looked at people, because you need relationships in order to elevate and to what God is calling you to do. So that was a turning point for me too in my healing process.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you started really building or rebuilding your relationship with God. And I know you also mentioned that you went to therapy. Was there any other things that you did that you felt like was very beneficial on getting to where you are now post your relationship?
I was in community. Like anything with domestic violence, like I attended any workshops, even though it wasn't every year. It was every year. It wasn't, all throughout the year, but when October came around, everybody had something. So I was in community. I was able to hear other people's stories. So I felt like I wasn't, alone in my healing process. I was able to open up to my family about a lot of things that happened. And come to find out, my mom was abused in her earlier relationship. She was in an abusive relationship where a gun was held to her head, but she didn't share these stories with us when we was children. So we wasn't able to identify the signs. So here I didn't know even my grandmother was abused in a domestic violence relationship, but those stories are not told. So just imagine if I knew their story, I waited to tell them, to reveal to them what was going on in my relationship. But what if they would have told me? I would have been able to identify the signs as soon as I saw them, and I would have been able to walk away. But it wasn't until I broke my silence is when my mother broke her silence, and then my grandmother broke her silence. So that's where it trickles down. That's where the issue is, because we're not sharing our stories. So that's why it keeps going on. And women of color is another issue because I feel like in our community, they tell us, like back in the day, don't talk about it. Don't talk about molestation. If somebody in your family molested you, just be quiet. Gotta handle it. But that's where the issue is happening. That's why it keeps occurring, because we're not speaking out about it.
I love that. And I love how you said breaking the silence. Like you breaking the silence help your mom break the silence, which ultimately also helped your grandmother. Was that your mom's mother?
Yes.
So we're talking 3 generations, y'all,
Yes.
Right. So let's think about that. So a lot of maybe some of the things that we've experienced from a traumatic perspective has came from, a level of a generational thing.
Yeah.
And but because you broke the silence, I'm sure there was some healing between you all.
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
my
It
God.
was.
Yeah.
I felt like it brought our relationship closer because I was
Yeah.
always close to my mom, but I never wanted to disappoint my mother as most children are.
Right. Even
But
as adults, you still never want to
yes,
disappoint your parents.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So I
Yeah.
just felt like when I broke my silence, my mom was able to break her silence. She never talked about it. She never discussed any other relationship other than my father. So I didn't know anything about it until she told me a gun was held to her head. And the reason why it didn't go off is because her abuser's mother came in the bedroom door before he pulled the trigger. And if it wasn't from that, she wouldn't be here today. She wouldn't have been my mother. So
Wow.
um
That is so emotional. My eyes are,
yes,
wow. That is,
yes,
ooh.
yes. So it was um it made our
How did you
relationship
feel hearing
closer.
that, knowing that,
It
you
broke
understand
my
what?
yeah, it
Yeah.
broke my heart. And my grandmother was always a person back in the day that always didn't want other people to look at you as being shameful. So
Right.
anything that my mom experienced, my grandmother, she didn't shove it under the rug, but that's basically what it was. And that's because that's the way she was taught. They didn't address anything. They was more worried about the people on the outside. But with me
Mhm.
breaking my silence, it did bring us closer. It allowed us to be open. And then my sister was able to be fully transparent about her relationship, that she was in an abusive relationship. But nobody knew this because nobody was talking about it. So I think that's why the cycle keeps happening because we're being silent about the things that happen to us. We're not worrying about protecting the people who abused us, who violated us. We need to be able to speak out so that we don't allow it to happen to our children.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question because I know you all were together for a span of 13 years.
Mhm.
Did he encounter any abuse as a child? Did he see anything that you know about?
He did.
Mm.
His mother would tell me his father was abusive. Um,
To her.
to her. Yep, his father was abusive and he would cheat with different women. And it was like she probably experienced the same thing I experienced, and his parents dealt with substance abuse. So um, it just like it ran down. So his mother would always tell me too, you need to get involved with somebody else. And his father would tell me that um he would tell me, he was like, you need to move on. You're a beautiful woman. You have your whole life ahead of you. You need to move on because your next chapter is brighter. Don't think of this as your only stepping stone. So even his parents would encourage me to move on because they didn't like to see the things I was going through and the abuse.
So even the father who did the abuse was telling you to leave. Did he change his life?
Yes,
Oh.
yes.
Mm.
He changed his life.
Mm.
Um,
And he may have saw some abuse himself. I mean, I'm saying this because I want people to draw connections and I want people to understand. And I think just going back to the stats, that over 70% of men were, I think it was something along the lines of 73% of male abusers were abused as children. And
mhm,
1 out of 15 or 90%, I'm sorry, of the children who were in abusive homes were eyewitnesses to it. So again, a lot of us repeat what we see rather than what we're told.
yes,
Um, man, this is really good. Because I think that a lot of people who are listening can either resonate with themselves or even someone they know,
yes.
whether that's friendship or even in their family. And I want to ask you a question. What are some tangible steps, let's say maybe 3, that a person can take now if they want to leave, right? Because as we talked about, on average, it says 7 times. You even said it was more than 7. For some people, they're just in this constant cycle. What is some tangible steps?
So I would say surrender the situation to God, because that's your safe haven. Like what anything that you're embarrassed about, you can share with God because it won't be repeated. Number 2, I would say the people who you trust, the people who are in your safe circle that will protect you. I would say get in community with other women also that are going through the same things that you are going through, and make sure that you have a supportive system that can help you during your transition. Because, when you get out of the relationship, you don't want to isolate yourself, because that's when depression sets in. That's when doubt sets in. So I would say get in community. And number 3, make sure that you have a plan, that you know where you are going to. Make sure you have a plan where you're going to a safe place, that they can protect you and that they will be there for you. Because a lot of times when you leave, your abuser will come and try to talk to you and bring you back. So I would say make sure you're in a safe place of people that can protect you and look out for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't ask this question because I actually, it just dawned on me again on asking this because I forgot. When you decided to leave for good, were you fearful that he would hurt you? Like when I say hurt you, I'm speaking in terms of, you know, when I talked about the
Yeah.
stats, 4,000 women get killed. Were you fearful of that?
I was,
Yeah,
because at the time he was on PCP. And that makes you hallucinate. You're not the same person. And before, like even with me trying to make him get off of the drugs, he would put me in headlocks and like literally choke me to the point where I couldn't breathe. He didn't even know how to get in and out of the bathroom, even to get in and out of his house. So that scared me because he knew where my parents lived.
right.
And with him using the drugs, I didn't ever know if he was going to be aggressive. Like he would ride by my car and spit on my car while my nieces was outside playing. So it was always like I'm always on watch, because I know him being on the drugs, that wasn't him. That wasn't the guy I fell in love with when we was in high school. So he became very aggressive. So I was wary, but I felt like I was in a safe place because my bonus dad was there, and he was very protective, and he was always watching out for me. He even made sure, like even taking me to work, he would drive me to work to make sure I was safe. So it helped because they wanted to make sure I was protected, even my mother. So yeah, that situation, I felt safe because I had people that were supporting me. And they may not understand it, but my parents did. So they protected
Mhm.
me. So I was grateful for that.
Wow. Kudos to your bonus father.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Kudos to him for just being there and protecting you and giving you that level of safety, him and your mom.
Yes.
And so I know you wrote a book. I spoke about it earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, called Made on What I
What I
Know.
know. Yeah. That's
And so let's talk about your book. What
okay.
inspired you to say, I need to write a book now about this?
So God started waking me up at 3:30 in the morning. And he was calling me to pray. And then he started sending me dreams about how I was in my relationship, how I felt every night. And I just started journaling about the times, like the dreams that he was showing me, but they felt so real. Like some of the dreams I had, I wanted to wake up and I was ready to fight. And I was like, God, why are you showing me this from my past? Like, what is going on? But I started documenting it, and I just started documenting in my memos, and then I got the urge to always want to write. After work, I always got an urge to write, so I just started writing down about my dreams and about the ways that I felt. But I never knew how I was going to put everything together because I needed help, with getting to the final steps. But that's really how. And the last two chapters was on forgiveness, and he talked about bitterness. And he woke me up at 5:30 every morning to write about it because I think it was still helping me heal and the things that I needed to heal from. So that's how it happened. And he gave me my name. I asked God, like, what is the title um, of my book? Because I was talking to my bonus father before he passed, and he was like, you're already done. You already know what's going to go in the book. So God is going to give you the title. So I prayed, and God gave me the title in my dream, and it was clear as day, made on what I know. So yeah, that's what inspired me to write my book.
Right. And this book is to help women overcome the after effects of domestic violence.
Yes, it's made on what I know. Find your serenity, reclaim your life, and pursue your goals after domestic violence.
I love that. I love that because
Yeah.
it's the after effect
Yeah.
on how this leaves you, right? It's like it's the courage to leave, but then it's the resiliency to rebuild.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Because the
Mm-hmm.
self-esteem gets shattered.
Yes. Yes.
Psychologically, you just aren't there. Depression, all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of things your finances get
Yes.
impacted. So much has to get rebuilt, and it takes resiliency to do that. And I'm going to put the link down for your book in the show notes as well.
Okay.
I know you also are having a workshop.
Yes, on
Um,
October the 21st in Washington, D.C. And the link is restoringthekingdominyou.com. And you can sign up and register today.
okay. And that workshop, what is the workshop going? I know it's going to be geared towards domestic violence and
Yeah, it's it is geared toward domestic violence, and it's also learning how to identify the signs in your relationship if you experience domestic violence, so that you can start creating a toolbox for the daughters in your life, your nieces, your goddaughters, your cousins, your sisters that are younger than you. It's also to create a story for you to share with someone, to get comfortable with you sharing your experience, because we have to break the silence in order to help the next generation. And also it talks about walking into your purpose. What is God calling you to do? It's not just to be a mom. It's not just to go to work at a 500 Fortune company. He's calling you to do something more than that. So just showing you or giving you questions on how God is calling you, or what you're called to do.
yeah, I love that. And this is an in-person workshop in
Yes,
DC.
in
So
person. Yes.
yeah, so if you are in that area, please make
Yeah.
sure and you know that this is helpful for you or anybody that you know. Um, let them know about it. I'm gonna put the link for that as well in the show notes. And I know we're pressing for time, but I gotta ask this question because I know that this is a real thing, right?
Yeah.
In terms of people who are they're in that situation now.
Mhm.
They're in it. In terms of some form of abuse that could be physical, it could be psychological, it could be other types of abuse. However, they're afraid to leave. They're fearful of the unknown. Some of them could be fearful of their life.
Mhm.
Some people can feel like if I do this, then I have a broken home now. So I'm a statistic of a broken home because I don't have the certain structure that culture tells me I should have.
Mhm.
Um, who would want me, right? Some of the things that you actually said yourself. What would you tell that person who knows they should leave? Who knows it's time to leave? Who knows it's time to break the cycle? What would you tell them?
I would tell them, number one, God wants you. I would say give it to the Lord. He will give you the strategy to leave. He will know a safe haven where you should go. A lot of people don't think God talks, but God does talk. So I would say give it to the Lord, and just know that there is life after domestic violence. That is not your everything. There is someone else that God has for you. And I would say focus on your goal. Remember who you was before the domestic violence. What goals did you have for yourself? Tap back into the things that you had set out for your life before domestic violence. Because a lot of the times I know you're looking through the eyes of your abuser for your happiness, but what about the things that you love to do? So I would say tap into them things. Just remember that you have a future. Remember who you was before the domestic violence, and just leave it in God's hands and allow him to give you the strategies to leave, because God knows. He's omnipresent and he knows everything that's going on. So he'll tell you exactly what you need to do. But also, if you have someone in your family, if you have friends that can support you, or programs that are in your local area that you can turn to that can give you a safe haven, I will also look into that. But just know that there is hope for your future, and you have a life after domestic violence. This is not it. This is just a small stepping stone for God to push you into your purpose, because there's so many people that need to hear your story.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Where can people find Miss Janelle, honey?
You can find me at the Janelle Hunt on Instagram and TikTok, and Janelle Hunt on Facebook.
All right. Thank you so much for Janelle. I will put all of that in the show notes, your website, your social media handles, your book, and this workshop, y'all. It's free too.
Yes, it's free.
Listen,
Free. Yes.
okay, it's free 99. So if you know
Yes.
somebody, that really needs this, right? Because this is breaking the silence is one of the most challenging things to do, getting out of the shame, the embarrassment, the judgment, and truly, sharing your story so that you can overcome and others can have the courage to do the same. So thank you so much, Janelle. I appreciate you coming over to the podcast and just sharing not only your surviving story, but your thriving story, right? You're in this season of thriving. You've written your book, you're smiling, the bitterness has been pulled from the root, right? Your relationships has elevated. That thriving piece is so essential. And I appreciate you being vulnerable enough to just share your story with us today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And thank you for allowing me to feel safe in sharing my story with you. So I appreciate you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you take care and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.